I think just as a, I guess a reminder before I make my point is when we talk about multiculturalism, again, we have to be careful when we, even if you say Iranian or Persian, you're generalizing because Iran is very diverse of languages, cultures, ethnicities, different colors of skin within this one country and one context that people come from. So, and I'm sure that's the case for many other countries. So, I guess that at the end of the day, it boils down to the individual, um, how everybody is different at the end of the day. But I think education is the key, as late or as early as possible. You know, whenever you catch a fish, it's fresh. They say, or whatever. And I think you have outlets, like electrical outlets. You imagine that's a media outlet for somebody coming from, back where I'm from. They have use a different system of outlets. So finding a converter, something in between that would connect them to the mainstream, I think would be key.
For the issues that I'm concerned about and that really I would like to see more about would be a bridge between the communities. How can these communities speak to each other and sort of foster a better understanding of each other and what's going on within each community? I don't want to see sort of ethnic enclaves. I don't want to see ethnic enclaves in media either. I'd like to see something that's inclusive, where if I'm watching a television show, that then it properly reflects the mix that is society here, without resorting to stereotypes. And I think that creates positive role models for young people to see and to aspire to. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not a math genius, but if you look at some of the stereotypes that I see for my own ethnic group on TV or movies, and I don't know Kung Fu. So I'd like to see more positive and realistic, not stereotypes, but realistic role models for people. And I think also, like you're saying, ethnic communities are very diverse. I'm a visible minority within the Chinese community. I probably have much more in common with your average mainstream Canadian than someone who just recently immigrated, but we're part of the same ethnic community. So if there was a television show that was geared towards them, I would have absolutely no interest in it. But we're sort of just all lumped in together into this sort of one group, just because we look the same. But Chinese people have been immigrating here for how many years? For over 100 years. So there are different perspectives within that community, and even within this one community, there needs to be bridges built to communicate with each other. And I think that's something that really needs to be focused on, so people feel that they are being listened to and in a meaningful way, and that there is dialogue there. And I think that's probably the most important thing, to lead towards better understanding, instead of just sort of seeing each other and accepting each other, but to actually understand each other.
I guess just from the media perspective, I'd like to emphasize that, journalism is an evolving, and media is an evolving entity. Henry just showed me a photo and a cut line from 1959.
1959.
Where they use the word Indian, yeah, and living the Indian life, and something about, but they still accept the white man's ways or something. The language is, you would not, you wouldn't even think to write anything like that. You couldn't use that language. It would be considered offensive in every possible way. So it has, since 1959 to, today, that kind of thinking is gone. But what's interesting is that, Arthur, you bring up the kind of subtlety of while the overt language is gone, the kind of the subtlety of our ability to fully understand the power of the words. It's still there. And, you know, I could have read that quote 100 times and it would not have, it would not have occurred to me what perhaps she may or may not have intended with that statement. But the impact that you brought to light, I mean, that's incredible. I think that the power that those words have. So I think the good news is, as journalism evolves, kicking and screaming into the next, decade or so, the language will change. Who's writing those words will change, or who's speaking those words will change. And I think you're going to, it's going to grow and it's going to change. And guess what? In 10 years, they're still going to be having a conversation about diversity, about language, about how to include youth. I mean, that is always going to be, how to engage youth, going to be a conversation to the ends of time. I think media is moving. It is moving. It might be moving at the speed of a glacier, and it might be frustrating for people, but it is moving, and it's moving faster now than it ever has before. And so I think, ultimately that's good news.
Hearing what everyone said, it's a few things I've heard a few times, and it's when I think Alden said the first time dialogue to action, and then I've heard it echoed a few more times, and I thought back to one of the first times when I first started in this field. I went to a dialogue and they talked, and then at the end of the dialogue, it was a 2-day conference or something, they were like, hey, we've talked for 2 days, we did this last year, we talked for 2 days, and we did the year before, and we said we need to do, we need action. And hearing it again tonight, it's always the same, and it's always, we'll say it again, moving towards more action. And I don't know exactly if there's one way to do that, especially if this is advice to CIC, because I understand how difficult it is to move things forward into action sometimes. But I think looking at two things that are happening, the changing definitions of multiculturalism to interculturalism to whatever else is there, as well as changing media. It's a moving target all the time. But our policies are exactly the same. And like our broadcast policy integrated multiculturalism in 1991, and that hasn't moved forward at all. And we have, I don't think that that's reflective, obviously, anymore of the realities of Canada and immigration. And so really just broad statements or broad recommendations to consider that things are moving forward, and that intersection of media and multiculturalism, that intersection is always changing and it's continuously moving quite quickly. Yeah, and to recognize that it's really important that we keep sight of that. And action.
So I think action is absolutely the key, and one of the suggestions in terms of how to actually start the movement towards change would be to use tools like the internet and social media, and to really empower our youth to have the skill set that they'll need tomorrow and 30 years from now, right? For traditional media outlets like television and, say, radio and newsprint to, say, launch websites, give people the absolute free reign to produce news or produce whatever they want, air that on the social media sites or on that particular website. because there's not going to be all these regulations and all that type of stuff there. And then make the commitment to actually have their voices heard. So whether it's a half an hour segment once a week or once a month or once a year or whatever on their TV show, let's fuse the two, the traditional media outlets and new media outlets. And I think that leveraging what the resources that we have today, and especially leveraging the resources that youth are already comfortable with, is certainly the key.
I think this was a wonderful conversation, and I agree. I think there's been a lot of talk. We've opened up a lot of doors of speaking, but I think the next move is action and carrying out that dialogue by doing things and by doing things together in the community. So I look forward to keeping in touch with all of you throughout the year. I hope that we can work together in some capacity in our community to create some change.